Or no. It was the beginning of chapter 13, and we looked at the first beast. That was about maybe 3 weeks ago. It was that day when Lori had a meeting going on too, right?
Yeah.
Right next to me. And chapter 13, the first part of the chapter deals with the first beast. And we kind of went through that. And then the second half of the chapter talks about the second beast. And let's see. Hold on. I got to minimize this for just a second because I can't see it fully. So we'll go ahead and read this. It says, so this is starting in verse 11, chapter 13. And this is John writing. He said, "Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs signs, great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and it might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it causes all, both great and small, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So when most people think of the book of Revelation, they probably think of this section or this portion of the book. You know, you get the mark of the beast, the image of the beast, 666, you know, all of this kind of provocative stuff. And today we'll be looking at, today I want to talk about the image of the beast, because that's what's mentioned first here in terms of the image of the beast, the mark of the beast, and then the number of the beast. So we get like these signifiers of who the beast is. And a lot of times, you know, people might see this study and be like, why are you talking about the image of
Hello,
the beast?
Myra. Are you on?
Like, I want to know about the mark of the
Okay,
beast.
so you are the
There's so
Galaxy
many people,
A715G.
you get on the internet, you watch a YouTube
Your phone
video,
is Galaxy, right?
you
Oh,
you
okay.
go read the comments, and usually there's someone in there typing in all caps, like they're screaming at us, like, don't take the COVID vaccine, it's the mark of the beast, all of this. So there's a lot of talk about the mark of the beast, and especially maybe more so lately because of COVID and stuff like that, and they're trying to introduce this vaccine, and there are some weird things about it. There's some things in the vaccine that haven't been in vaccines before. And everybody's fascinated with the mark of the beast. What is the mark of the beast? You know, they say it goes on your forehead or your right hand. And based off of what I've studied, I would say the image of the beast is more scandalous than whatever the mark might be. So a lot of people are obsessed with, what is the mark? What's the mark of the beast? You know, what is it? What is it going to look like? You can't buy or sell unless you have the mark or the name of the beast. And so in the next couple of weeks, I want to go over these three things. I want to go over the image of the beast, the mark or the name of the beast, because the name is tied to the mark, and then also the number of the beast. And we've kind of touched on all of these, throughout the past year and a half, but I haven't put together a full study like this. And I want to put these together, because they're tied into one another, but they're a little different. And a lot of what people think about the mark, people are kind of obsessed with what the mark is. And I kind of want to draw your attention to the image of the beast, because I feel like the image is more important than what the mark might be. Because the mark, I believe, is more spiritual than it is a physical thing.
Mm.
And we've talked about this before. I don't think it's going to be it's not something that actually goes on your forehead or your right hand. That symbolic language that John is using. And you can look back to the Old Testament to see what he's talking about there. So just some bullet points, the outline of the second beast. He rises out of the sea. The first beast, it said he came from the land. The first beast comes from the sea. The second beast comes from the earth or the land. And then it makes the earth worship the first beast. It deceives the earth or the people that dwell on the earth by telling them to make an image for the beast, the first beast that was wounded. And then it said it gives breath to the image of the beast. And then this image, it speaks, and causes those that would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And then we see towards the end that the image of the beast is connected to the mark of the beast or the name of the beast, and also the number of the beast, which is 666. And so my question is, let's start out with, what is the image? What might the image of the beast be? People have thrown out theories throughout the years, throughout the decades, of what the image is. Is it a statue that gets erected, and, the beast causes us to worship that statue like King Nebuchadnezzar did during the time of Daniel? Is it a painting? Is it something that's hanging up somewhere and we're supposed to worship that? Is it a coin? Does it have to, with the buying and selling, is his likeness imprinted on a coin? And then once you get to like maybe the 80s or 90s, people start talking about more technological things. Is it a hologram? Do we worship a hologram? Is it a clone? And then I got this picture on here. This is a picture of, or it's an actual statue. I think it's from Brazil or Argentina, maybe somewhere in South America. And it's a statue of Prince Charles, believe it or not. And
That
then,
one?
what's that?
Is that that one there with the wings?
Yeah.
It's Prince
Yeah,
Charles?
it's a statue of Prince Charles. And then there was the reason why I know about this is because I was listening to a video once, like last summer, and this guy was talking about, and this gets tied into the number of the beast, but there was this guy, he was trying to figure out who the six, like all people have done throughout history, even in the time of the early church, they tied the 666 back to Nero, because he persecuted Christians, and that his name, when you wrote it out in Greek, equaled to 666 in gematria. And this guy that I was listening to, he said that he put in Prince Charles of Wales in gematria, and his name comes out to 666. And then he hears about the statue that was made of him with these wings, and he said, well, that's the image of the beast, because Prince Charles is the Antichrist, because his name equals 666 in gematria. And if you remember when we did our study on King Solomon and the number 666, that the use of gematria probably isn't how you calculate the number 666. That's just too simple. It requires no work at all. You got these computer programs that you just type in a name and it gives you a number. And that's why John says in Revelation 13 that this calls for wisdom. You know, typing a name into a program and getting a number out of it, that doesn't require wisdom necessarily. That's really simple and easy to do. And that's why I bring this up, because people
made?
What's that?
What year was that statue made? You know?
I think it was in this century. I think it was, okay. I'm not sure when it was made. But yeah, the dude that said he typed in, you know, he said he found out Prince Charles of Wales was 666. So he thinks that Prince Charles is the Antichrist. And then he used this statue of him to kind of back that claim up. Well, like, this is the image of the beast then, or the image of the Antichrist. And what I want to draw your attention to is Revelation is probably the most Old Testament referenced book in the New Testament, believe it or not. The book that deals with future events is actually really rooted in the Old Testament. And there's a book that this scholar, this guy, G.K. Beale, he wrote a book called John's Use of the Old Testament in Revelation. And he goes through all the examples of from throughout the book where John borrows language from the Old Testament or borrows imagery from the Old Testament, or he's playing off of ideas that are found in the Old Testament. And he says here that there is a general acknowledgement that the apocalypse, that's Revelation, contains more Old Testament references than any other New Testament book. But then he goes on to say that, you know, to make that claim objectively, you know, you can't really make that claim objectively, because a lot of the data that they use is kind of subjective on whether or not John is actually referencing an Old Testament verse. You know, so there are some things that are kind of up for debate. And so depending on how you gather that data, you know, it really depends on, you know, your definition of what a reference is. But regardless, Revelation is one of it's up there in terms of the New Testament books that references back to the Old Testament. And so I feel like that's a good starting point for us, is like when we're reading through the book, we need to try and pick up on things that we may have read about or remember from the Old Testament, because I think that will greatly help us understand what John is, you know, trying to communicate in the book, because it is a really difficult book. So with that in mind, you know, we got this in Revelation 13, the image of the beast. And so if we take that approach that John is referencing the Old Testament a lot, you know, where else in the Bible do we get this image term? Or where else do we see it? Maybe even in the Old Testament. Any particular passages come to mind when you hear the word image?
Daniel,
yep, where Nebuchadnezzar, you talking about?
Yep.
With the statue? Yep.
Genesis?
Yep. Genesis, for the first page of the Bible, actually talks about image. Genesis 1:26, God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our own likeness." And then he reiterates it in verse 27. It says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them." So is John thinking back to Genesis chapter 1 when God created humans, that he made us in his likeness and in his image? Does John have this idea in mind when he's writing Revelation 13, when the beast, you know, creates an image of himself? And so that's the question. You know, is the imaging language that we read in Revelation 13, does it connect back to Genesis 1? Because if it does, that's a big clue as to what the image of the beast might be. So we gotta remember that, the Bible wasn't written in English. The New Testament was written in Greek. So if we go to Revelation 13 and we see what that Greek word is for image that in English we translate to image, we see that the word is icon or icon, basically, where we get the same English word for icon, and it means image or likeness. And so that sounds a lot like what we read about in Genesis chapter 1. And so then we should ask the question, is that same word used in Genesis? If it is, then we've got like a connection, like a distinct connection between those two things. But if you know your Bible, you know that the Old and New Testaments were written in different languages. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and then a little parts of it, like Daniel, were written in Aramaic. And then the New Testament was written entirely in Greek. So how would we know if that the word that we see in Revelation that's written in Greek, how do we know if that's the same word that was written in Genesis 1:26 when Genesis was originally written in Hebrew? How do we know if those two are the same word? And this brings us to a bigger topic of, not just in this instance, but how do we harmonize things between the two testaments? How do we harmonize ideas and themes between the two? How do we know when a New Testament writer is borrowing an idea or a theme from something in the Old Testament? Especially, how do we know because they're written in different languages? Well, we use what's called the Septuagint. And the Septuagint, it's just a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, basically. So right around the time of Jesus, or a couple hundred years before Jesus came, the Greek culture was the dominant culture of the time. And so the Hebrew scholars translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek. And that's why a lot of times it's referenced or it's abbreviated as the LXX, because tradition says that there were 70 scholars that translated it from Hebrew into Greek. And that's the Roman numeral for 70. It was compiled in the 3rd century BC, so it was a couple hundred years before Jesus. And it also contains like the intertestamental writings or the Apocrypha, books like Enoch, which we're familiar with, the book of like Tobit and the Maccabees and the book of Wisdom and those types of books. They were included in the Septuagint, not necessarily as authoritative, when it comes to scripture and stuff like that, but they were there. They held those works in high esteem and they included them in the Septuagint. And so the New Testament writers were familiar with the Septuagint because they were writing the New Testament in Greek. And so the obvious question that we should ask is like, were they using the Septuagint when they were borrowing Old Testament ideas and repurposing them in the New Testament? And scholars, debate back and forth about, what John used as his inspiration when he wrote Revelation. Obviously, he had the visions and he was relaying what he saw in the visions, but he was also familiar with, his Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. And so if we use the Septuagint, which was written in Greek, that's a great tool that we can use to see if a New Testament writer is playing off of an Old Testament idea. And so if we go to Genesis 1:26 and we look up that word image, we see that the word there is icon, the exact same one we see in Revelation. So basically in Genesis 1:26, God is saying, let us make man in our icon after our likeness. And so the same word is used in Genesis as it is in Revelation, at least in the Septuagint. And so the question, if icon in Genesis 1:26 means humans created in God's likeness, then the question becomes, is it possible that the image or the icon in Revelation 13 is referring to a type of human or humanity that is made in the beast's likeness? Or we could put it another way, because we know that the image language in Genesis 1:26 refers to a collective group of people. Like we as humanity, collectively, we image God because that's how he created us. So does the image language in Revelation 13, does that refer to a collective group of people as well who image the beast, or who are made in the likeness of the beast that comes from the earth? So this is much more than just a statue, I believe, or a hologram or a painting or something like that. And so, as we've been seeing is a common theme, not only when doing the book of Revelation, but the entire Bible, we come to a fork in the road now. We have kind of two options, two ways we could go here. Either the image language in Revelation 13 is referring to some type of humanity made in the likeness of the beast, or maybe it is just a statue or something, or a hologram or something like that. But we're definitely at a point in our path in studying this book where we kind of have to make a choice, or we have to at least acknowledge that we could go one of two ways with this. And so you start weighing the evidence for each. And that's what I want to go over in the next couple weeks. Is like, well, what might it look like if we go down this path of, what if the image,
Scott,
referencing, humans?
Scott,
Yep.
historically speaking, the church, where do they lean towards when it comes to the image of the beast? It is just a physical statue or something like what you've said.
Yep.
Speaks about a kind of a brand, a group of humanity that reflects him. But historically, because this is a new thing, okay?
Yep. I would say
We,
historically, people would tend to lean towards like maybe it's like a statue or something that's set up in the temple. But this idea of it being a type of human or humanity, historically, I don't think that has been the case.
Okay.
That people interpreted it that way. And to be honest, even today, that would probably be the minority position. But if we actually look at the text, I believe it's very plausible that is the case. And that's what I want to look at in the next couple of weeks is like, the more we look at this and the more we go down this path, the more I think it makes sense.
Yes. And I think the key there also is the, the 70 scholars, that translated the Bible from Hebrew to Greek, and maybe even, the history, the context the time of Jesus, the Jewish scholars, I mean, how would they interpret the image when Genesis 1:26, for example? I mean, they know that. In your research, did it pop up? How they would how they would interpret it?
I haven't really come across too much of how they, because when you think of Revelation 13, like you think of the mark of the beast, the right hand or the forehead, and then obviously 666. Like that's really provocative, and it gets people's attention. Whereas I feel like the image of the beast kind of gets glossed over a little bit. And to be honest, I'm not really sure how the early church might have interpreted the image language here. But based off of what I've studied, I think that's what John is referencing. And that's what we'll look at in the next couple of weeks. Like, what might that look like? And I'm willing to be wrong on it. Either I'm wrong about this, I'm way out in left field, or it's just a small piece of the puzzle that we're figuring out. It's not the whole picture. Like if I'm right on what I'm talking about here, it's just a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole picture.
That's why we need to study this.
Exactly.
The thing is, I asked this question to others too. Okay, people that I thought know more. Okay, they are more knowledgeable, and they, like you said, gloss over the question. Like they will of course offer some answer, but they themselves are not convinced with their answer that's really the one. So I think we should really be going through this as a group. And in the end, we may have to make our own conclusion. Each one of us will have to be responsible to come up with something. But we need to go through this process. So I would like to encourage each one to please stay with the process. It's going to be uncomfortable sometimes, but that's just how it is. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, especially so when we do stuff like this, and it isn't the popular answer, or it might not even be an answer you've heard before. Like if you go and start doing research, what is the image? You might not find this anywhere, and so if this is the first time you're hearing it, and you're hearing it from me, and you're like, what is this guy talking about? Like, this is weird. Like, that's okay. Like, don't take my word for it. Study it yourself. Don't believe what I say. I'd encourage you to not believe what I say, to actually do, your own research on it. And I'm willing to be wrong on it too. I'm not going to live or die by this, but the more I study it, the more I become convinced that there is a connection there, that this imaging, the idea of us being created in the image of God, Satan's trying to, or the powers of darkness are trying to mess with that. And the farther we go down this road of this being the possibility, I believe the more it'll make sense.
Okay.
The more it'll fill in the gaps where we read things like for instance, like taking the mark of the beast in order to buy or sell. A lot of people think, it's a microchip that's implanted in your in your hand or your forehead. And if you take that, you seal your fate, you're going to hell. And then some people, they can't really, can you accidentally take the mark of the, people are really freaked out about this, with the vaccine, with the mRNA stuff. They're like,
exactly,
they get freaked out.
Yes.
And I don't think the mark of the beast is something that you can accidentally take. I don't think there's going to be people that take it and we're like, oops, I took the mark of the beast. That's not what it is.
Is there anyone here who had been vaccinated already? Mara, have you been vaccinated already? You,
Me.
Delane, have you been vaccinated?
Nope. Nope.
Because the people are waiting. I mean, some people are waiting for the vaccine to really show proof that it's working. But I
Well,
know
my
some
auntie
people,
had.
yeah, but I know some people who would refuse because they thought they're going to be receiving the mark of the beast. You see, did that for me, I'm not afraid about receiving the mark of the beast. I don't think I can. Like what Scott said, that's very important. You cannot, you cannot get it accidentally. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to be knowingly saying, I'm going to take the mark of the beast. You
Yeah.
know, and for some people
That's
like me, it's because I'm just afraid. I'm not too sure about how it will work. Is it really going to work? Um, or it is like some people. This is the government's way of depopulating, the country or the world,
Mhm.
and that scares me more, So anyway, this is really interesting. Believe me,
Yeah.
people will be coming to you, to the Blue Church people, and ask, what do you think? Is it safe? I'm not selling my soul to the devil by being vaccinated or things like that. We've got to have an answer because people are starting to ask questions now, especially.
Pastor,
Yeah.
can I share something?
Go ahead.
The the mark of the beast, it has to be a choice. And because you're stating out of your mouth that you are rejecting Jesus and you're receiving that. And I think that's the key. And I don't think that the chip is in the vaccine, but the vaccine itself, there's just been many people that have they have had people that have died. They have people that have gotten violently ill. I have a adopted nephew who took the first one and then he got really sick. And then the second shot, he wound up with Bell's palsy and he's just a young guy. But I don't take it for because of I have an autoimmune response to things. And just from listening to different doctors about that. So my choice, as I have not taken any vaccine since I was 14, when that thing came up on my arm. And so that's why I'll tell people, look, you're not going to take the mark, but it's up to you. You have to research it and see what's in it and look at the studies as to, people that, because it's still too soon for them to have like enough information on the vaccine. So
Yeah.
What do you
But
guys think about the RNA part of it? For me, I feel like that's the kind of concerning.
What's that
Is
again?
that
I'm
part
sorry.
The mRNA piece
Oh.
of it, like what can that, like, what does that do to you? It's never been used in a vaccine before. Like, is there
that
a
the
way that
one-
it can alter your DNA, or you know what I mean? I don't know.
that's what I was hearing about too. Also, that because it somehow it attaches itself to your DNA. Is that and that I think that's the part where it does the job that your immune system is supposed to do. But I think that's what I was reading about last night. I was hearing about that part, that eventually it can affect if they keep doing it, then they want to do a third one, another vaccine. And at the worst, the worst, they say that it's mutating, that the worse it gets, then they have to have a stronger vaccine. And so I that part kind of like caught my attention too.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on, Scott.
Well, I think I'll stop it here
Okay.
for now. I'll leave you with that. Like, what could the image possibly look like? And then we'll get in like just the preview for next week or next time whenever I do this. Like, we'll get into things like transhumanism, like enchantment, witchcraft. Like I think they're all tied into it,
Yeah.
possibly. And where things might be trending that way with those things, in science, technology, things like that. And then we'll tie it into like, I guess what it really boils down to is, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be made in the image of God?
Yep, that's a good question.
And then that's really what it boils down to, because the image of the beast ultimately gets tied back to the image of God, us being made in the image of God. And so in some ways, the image of the beast is an undoing of that, or maybe a reversal of that, possibly, and that's way more scandalous than the mark, whatever the mark is. A lot of people are obsessed with what the mark is, when you should be more concerned about what the image is, because the mark is tied to the name. And again, if you take that idea of name, where else do we get that idea in the Bible, in the Old Testament? It's the name of God, to bear God's name. The third commandment, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And that means more than just saying God's name as a cuss word. It means when Israel entered into a covenant with God, it was basically a marriage covenant. They were bearing his name. They were taking his name. Like when you marry someone and they take your name, you become one. And so the idea of bearing God's name, as Christians, we bear his name, and taking his name in vain, it's way more than just like saying his name as a cuss word. Taking his name, it involves our actions and how we interact and treat others who are also made in the image of God. That's what it means to bear God's name. And so I think the mark of the beast, and then so I'm kind of getting into the next study to take the mark of the beast, because the mark is tied to the name. Taking the mark of the beast is taking the name of the beast. In other words, marrying yourself to the beast and bearing his name. It's not a physical mark. It's not something that goes on your forehead or your hand. It's an action. It's a declaration or a covenant that you make with the beast, and you take his name.
It's similar to that a seal is placed upon us that can be seen by the the
angels.
Satan and the angels. So it has to be something similar to where they can recognize, like, we don't have anything on us that people can see. But and it also talks about us getting a new name, and that so
and so
Jesus got one too, that no one knows.
but he knows.
Yeah.
And then he says he'll give you a white stone with a name which no one knows, and that's basically your ticket. That's basically like your ticket into heaven or into God's presence, is like you have this stone with his name on it, and all this stuff ties back to the Old Testament. And so the mark of the beast is really just you making a covenant with the beast. You're marrying yourself to the beast. That's what the mark is.
Let's talk about that next week. It's really
we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. But like, I just want to get you thinking that, a lot of what we've assumed about the image of the beast and the mark of the beast and 666, we got to put that all aside. We really have to understand the Old Testament. The Old Testament is the key to unlocking what these things mean.
Yeah. We have to go through some kind of deprogramming because we have been we have been programmed to think a certain way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that I've been learning in the past 18 months, year, 2 years, is like, you got to kind of undo what tradition has taught you. And you really have to get to what the Bible is actually saying.
And a big chunk
And I
of
know
that is,
everybody says that. I know everybody says that.
yeah.
But I feel like not a
But
lot.
again, Scott, is the unlocking of the revelation is really going where you have to go back to the Old Testament,
Yep.
because
Mhm.
John is not writing something that is so new,
Mhm.
that God has not spoken about before. It was already way out there.
Mhm.
It's just that we have been so focused on the New Testament. Again, like I said, we didn't really consider the Old Testament as a part of the Scripture, although we said it's a Bible too. But we have uh, uh, we have looked the two Testament separate, as separate.
Yeah. And that's kind of, even within this study, there was a study within the study of like, how do you track ideas between the two testaments?
Mm.
How do you track an idea in the New Testament if it has, precedence in the Old Testament?
Mm.
Well, the Septuagint is a big help because, that was written in Greek and the New Testament's written in Greek. So if you find an idea in the New Testament, look at the original language, certain words that were used, and see if those words are used in the Old Testament in the
Already.
Septuagint.
Yeah.
And if they are the same words, then there's likely a connection there.
Yes. That's
And
right.
so, and that goes on just studying the image of the beast. There's all kinds of things in the New Testament that has precedence in the Old Testament. You just got to do a little digging. And that's really honestly my goal is like, I want people to be able to pick up their Bibles and read it and understand it for themselves. That's my goal, because for so long I struggled. I was like, how do these two books mesh together? Because sometimes they seem like they were at odds. It didn't. But the more I understand, one, the supernatural context of the Bible, how to study between the language differences between the two testaments. Like, my goal is I want to understand the entire narrative or the entire story that God is trying to tell between the two testaments. It's
Wow.
one story that's woven between centuries, millenniums.
Well, take your time. I think, I don't know, man. I don't know if the rapture will take place within the year. According to your schedule, it looks like we will have to be here for what, 7 years at least?
Maybe even that. I don't know. I don't know where the seven, like, I'm on the fence about the 7 years.
Well, anyway,
Scott, you know what I found interesting?
What's
That
that?
a lot of the Jewish people, they most of them that I've at least several that I've known, that they found Christ in the Old Testament.
mm,
And I remember this one man's particular testimony. He said he was reading it in a passage in the in his Torah, and he said that that's that Jesus that they're talking about, and that's the one that he found in the Old Testament. And he came. He said he accepted Messiah, and then he said, now that he said something about getting baptized. So he just looked in the phone book, and he was there was a church that I was going to for a revival, and here he chose that one, called the guy and asked if he could get baptized. He said he just found Messiah. So the guy said, come on over. And so he got baptized, and it was really awesome.
by the way, Myra, I'm really praying for Ron, and if you can get him to study, to read his Old Testament, that would really be good. But Ron, I mean, is he the one you said that has a Jewish background? Your brother? Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you said, yeah.
okay. Okay. Anyway,
I have I have a comment.
Mhm.
Because we are discussing the image, and we know that the enemy is the counterfeit, makes a counterfeit. So Christ and the Antichrist, and Jesus referenced those who are against him. He told them, "You are of your father, the devil."
Mhm.
So it, in a sense, that refers to a group of people who
Mhm.
follows their father, the devil.
Mhm.
And we are the children of God, and we are the children of light. So the devil is good in counterfeiting. And I want to share, this is very new. I happened to see yesterday the Jewish boy